In this tutorial, we create multiple floor joists and add subflooring. Alright, at this point, we'd like to create the floor. We have our floor joist component, and we're basically going to replicate it. So basically, we'll orbit and we'll zoom into this lower corner here. Pressing the M key invokes the Move tool. Press the Alt or Option key, and we'll get a small plus sign. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but basically that means we're going to copy this instead of actually move it. Snap to this lower corner, click the mouse once, and start to move over, and you can see our copy is moving. And I'm going to use a 16-inch spacing, so in the length box in the lower left, before I click the mouse, I'll press 16 and carriage return or enter, and that's basically created one copy of the floor joist 16 inches away from the previous copy. Now tell Sketchup how many copies of this floor joist we want. If I just type on the keyboard 12x for 12 times, enter, I now have 12 copies of the original floor joist. So if I zoom out a little bit here, I use the wheel on the mouse to zoom a little bit here and use the middle mouse to orbit around, you can see that I've created 13 total floor joists. Alright, now that we have our floor joists, we want to put some subflooring on there, which is basically plywood. So what we can do is down in this corner of the floor joists, and we'll press R for the rectangle tool, snap to this end point on this first floor joist, and start to drag out a rectangle. And it depends on where Sketchup is assuming you're trying to draw to, but if you come out here a few floor joists and follow the edge, you'll start to create a horizontal rectangle, basically a rectangle in the green and red axes. Instead of clicking now, you can again type in the dimensions box in the lower right. You can type the dimension of this rectangle, and this is going to be a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of plywood. So we type 4 with the foot marker, a comma, and then an 8 with the foot marker, and when we press return we get a 4 by 8 rectangle. So we'll use the push pull tool, press P, and we'll grab the surface of this one time and start to drag up, and we'll get the thickness of our plywood. So I want this to be 3/4, so in the distance box I can type 3/4, or I can just type 0.75. Either way I get a 3/4 inch thickness. So this time we want to make a component out of this, so we'll press the space bar to get to the select tool, and then we'll triple click the surface of the shape we just created to select it, the whole thing, and now we press the G key to bring up the component, and we can just type in plywood 4x8. Sounds pretty good. And when we create that, now we have a component that is the plywood, and we like to color that, so we'll choose the paint bucket tool, and this time we will go ahead and use the last one, and when we click on there we get the sheet of plywood. We can replicate this, fill the rest of the subfloor in, so we'll come down here and we'll grab this corner back here, pressing M to switch to the Move tool and Alt to activate the copy, and since the plywood is the selected board, we'll grab the end point and we'll start to move it down, and we could actually just line it right up with the existing sheet of plywood by letting Sketchup snap the corners together, and now we've got 2 sheets of plywood. Now we'll fill in the rest of the subfloor by replicating the sheets of plywood, rotating them and placing them. So press spacebar to get back to select and click once on a sheet of plywood, and then again M to move it, and Alt to copy it. Click once and start sliding it over, and it doesn't really matter where you put this one, but if you keep it sliding along on the edge, it'll kind of keep it vertically in the correct position. Click a second time to set the plywood down. Change the view slightly and grab one of the red rotator handles and rotate the board around -90. And the Move tool is still active, so we'll grab this endpoint and move it over to here, and we'll try to snap it right to the end of this piece of plywood. So we're basically going to lay these pieces in here and fill in the rest of the subfloor. So press Alt to copy it and move it over a little bit, set it down, rotate it around 90 degrees, grab this corner and snap it to there, and then press the space bar, select this one again, move, Alt or Option to copy, grab this corner and move it over to here, and now we're basically filling in the plywood pieces to complete the subfloor. So rotate around here and we'll grab this one and again press the Alt key one more time to do a copy and put it there. And I don't really have any idea how these best go, but if we just keep moving them and pressing the Alt key, we'll end up with something similar to this. In this corner right here, we'd probably want to put a 4x4 sheet. So let's move copy this sheet one more time, pressing the Alt key, and bring it basically out here. Now what we've got is a spare piece of plywood. Now the thing to keep in mind is all these pieces of plywood are exactly the same component. So if we modify one, it's going to change all of them. So for example, if we choose the space bar and we double click this piece of plywood here, we enter the component edit mode. In the component edit mode, the piece we're working on is enclosed in a dashed box. If we choose something like P for push-pull tool and we grab this edge and we start moving it, you'll notice how all of the other pieces in the model start to move. So that's telling us that this particular component we're editing is the same exact component as all the rest of the pieces of the plywood. So at this point we'll press escape because we don't want to change this. And then we'll press the space bar and we'll click outside of this dashed bounding box. And now what we want to do is take this particular piece of plywood here, click it once, right click, and choose Make Unique. And what that did is it made this particular piece of plywood its own component. So if we double click now on this one, we enter this same component edit mode with the bounding box. If we use the push pull tool and we grab this edge and we push it, now it doesn't affect the other pieces of the plywood. We want to do a push pull and we want to push it back 4 feet. So we type in 4 with the foot marker, and that now pushed it back 4 feet. So since it was 8 foot, it's now a 4x4 sheet of plywood. So press the space bar to go to select and click outside the bounding box, and now we have our new component. So this time we'll move it, we'll grab this corner and we'll put it right here and snap it. Let's SketchUp snap it, and now we've filled in that corner there. Using the select tool, click the plywood once, choose the move tool, and then let SketchUp snap the endpoint in the component. Press the Alt key to get a copy and move it down here and let SketchUp again snap it to there. Rotate around here and let's adjust these floor joists to the correct length. So press the space bar and click away to unselect everything. Rotate around to here with the orbit and double click this very end floor joist. And that takes us into that edit mode. Now, if you can't see the plywood while you're in the edit mode, it's possible that you have a view mode turned on that will disable viewing things that are not being edited. So up here under the view menu, under component edit, look to see if you have hide rest of model chosen. If you have that chosen, and I'll choose it right now so you can see, basically it hides everything except the component and all the copies of the component that you're working on. Sometimes that's an advantage, but at this point I don't want to use that, so I'll turn off hide rest of model because I want to see the plywood. And the reason is because right now we're going to use the push pull tool. So I'll press the P key, push the end of the joist, and we'll push it back. And now here's where we take advantage of the fact that we can see the plywood. We hover over the edge of the plywood, and now what we're doing is pushing the floor joist back exactly the distance needed to match the plywood. So when we click the mouse, it changes the size of the floor joist, and now we can press the space bar and click outside of the edit bounding box, and we can see that our floor joists now match with the plywood flooring.